Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today I want to talk to you about the actual makeup of the 117th Senate. Now, you may know it as the makeup between Democrats and Republicans, which is, of course, Democrats currently have 48, Republicans currently have 50 seats, meaning Republicans are in the lead, but whoever wins Georgia is going to get between 1 and 2 seats, which could flip the balance of power to the Democrats, because in the case of a 50-50 tie, the vice president steps in and breaks it, and the vice president is currently Kamala Harris, a Democrat, so this is going to be interesting. And still up for competition. But what most people don't know is the US political parties, while it is a two-party system, break down into essentially 5 separate parties. It used to be 6, but the Republicans have kind of congealed into 2. So, for the Republican camp, you have what I've dubbed the Main Street Republicans and the Freedom Republicans, after the former Main Street and Freedom caucuses. Main Street Republicans are your usual conservatives. They agree climate change is real, but they're not for doing anything about it. They want to cut taxes for businesses, but they're not against doing certain social programs or deregulation if it makes sense. These are the guys who you could see signing a bill, co-sponsoring a bill with a Democrat for a relatively minor issue, but overall, it gets some sort of traction and could get passed, and is overall a minor good. They're pro-conservation, the usual thing, while also being pro-gun rights and the like. While the Freedom Group is much more deeply conservative. These are your more Trumpian Republicans. And if you can't see the numbers, the Main Street guys are at 26 seats, and the Freedom Caucus guys are at 24 seats. Meaning, overall, the Main Street guys do have a vague majority, but due to the fact they are so kinda, as a caucus, probably the most wishy-washy out of the 5, they basically go with whatever the Freedom Group says, only really pushing back on, supremely divisive matters, such as, for example, trying to nullify the election. So, overall, you can see that the Freedom Group is mostly concentrated in the Deep South, with some breaks and to the Great Plains, but not much success up in the Northeast, or in the more Mormon-centric areas of the country, or in very stay out of my business, Alaska. Well, the Democrats break into 3 parties: the Conservative Democrats, the Liberal Democrats, and the Progressives. Now, the Progressives are very good on, and actually, before I go into where they're doing well, I should clarify, I base this off of whoever the current leader of the Democratic Party is, in this case, Joe Biden. So the Liberal Democrats will mostly and usually vote along the same lines as Joe Biden ran his campaign. So, to use healthcare as an example, they're pro-public option, but not necessarily pro-Medicare for all, pro-$15 minimum wage, but no more, that type of thing. Progressives are to the left, pro-Medicare for all, pro-all those various things. You'll find your UBI kickers in here. While conservative Democrats are to the right of the liberal Democrats, and for the most part will agree on the broad picture. Therefore, a $15 minimum wage, but maybe give it 8 years to get there. Some form of public option, but really we should just focus on expanding Obamacare. These guys are the ones who are the most pro-tax cut out of the group, all that jazz. And out of that, the Democrats there are 7 conservative Democrats, making them the smallest caucus in the Senate, and keep in mind these aren't official caucuses, this is my breakdown based on their voting record. Any individual can join a caucus of their own free will, so that can skew the difference, plus people's self-proclaimed ideology, i.e. Rand Paul claims to be a libertarian when in fact he's just your normal Freedom Caucus type fellow. But overall, the conservatives have kind of a smattering across the country, with their strongest state being Delaware of all places. But their standard bearer would be someone like Joe Manchin, with Dianne Feinstein also being a pretty common carrier in that case. The Liberal Democrats, like I said, Joe Biden's backbone. These guys are 26 seats. They actually have the same number of seats as the Main Street Republicans. This is why periodically you can see bills that have a lot of compromise getting passed through. A brilliant example would be the First Step Act, which was passed in the last Congress. It's what happens when you get these two groups to work together, but usually they don't, partially due to the Freedom guys, honestly. But yeah, so you have the liberal Democrats who are mostly in the center and northeast of the country. All the Democratic seats in the Rust Belt, for the most part, are liberal Democrats, and in the Southwest. And lastly, you have the progressives. These guys are your Bernie Sanders type fellows. They have a lot of seats and even if they're not as liberal as Bernie Sanders, they would vote with him on most issues. So they've got a good chunk of the West Coast, and this is including California's newest appointed senator. They have Hawaii, Illinois, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, as well as some parts of New England and Jersey. So there you have it. The breakdown, 48-50, is actually a lot more of a multi-party system than it seems just in two coalitions. However, Georgia is going to be a change-up to the status quo. So already we're seeing what seems to be a likely Congress coming in that's going to get mild compromises done between the liberals, Main Streets, and conservatives, with the Freedom group holding things up and the progressives introducing increasingly bold legislation that will be rejected. Not necessarily outright, but definitely watered down at the very least. But Georgia could mess with the status quo a bit, because right now both the candidates, from what we can see, fall into the liberal-democratic category. If the Democrats win, they control the Senate, that changes everything. But if the Republicans win both seats, and only both seats, both of those seats go to the Freedom guys, making them tied with the Main Street guys in their relative numbers. And for a long time in the history of the GOP, the Freedom guys have not had a majority. They've pulled the party in a direction, but they've never really had the power to outmatch the Main Street guys. So they usually just let the Main Street guys will go along with whatever the Freedom guys propose, but the Freedom guys don't really have the votes to outweigh the Main Street ones. This could give them the power to do so. What does that look like? It means a noticeably more, for lack of a better term, hostile Congress to Joe Biden. And if Republicans win in any way, it's going to be more hostile it's going to be a hostile Congress, but we're talking actively stopping things, only passing their own legislation, that type of business. A complete halt to the standard of government, because these Main Street guys, at the end of the day, do have a level of ideology they wish to govern with. So, with all that being said, if you liked the video, drop a like and a comment down below. If you want to hear more from the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted when new content is released. If you want to hear more from me outside of YouTube, I have a Twitter at OneManThinkTan1, the Roman numeral, link in the description below, and as always, and most importantly, have a wonderful day.